All right, well, here we are in chapter 27 of the book of Acts. Paul is speaking before Agrippa and Bernice and Festus. If you're not familiar with these, please go watch the last two videos. Get you caught up with what's going on in this. This is kind of the continuation of this longer story. Verse 1, and when it was determined that we should sail into Italy, they delivered Paul and certain other prisoners unto one named Julius, a centurion of Augustus's band. So Paul's now on his way to Rome to meet with Caesar, basically, and to plead his case before him. Now they're calling of Augustus's band. That's where the centurion of Augustus's band, Julius, is part of this Roman army, basically. Verse 2, and entering into a ship of Adramyttium, we launched, meaning to sail by the coasts of Asia, one Aristarchus, a Macedonian Thessalonica being with us. Remember, Aristarchus has been a servant that helped Paul in some of his missionary efforts, and he's there now with them. Verse 3, and the next day we touched at Sidon, and Julius courteously entreated Paul, and gave him liberty to go unto his friends to refresh himself. So Julius is in charge of Paul, and he's like, okay, yeah, you can go talk to your friends. We need to come back. Verse 4, and when we had launched from thence, we sailed under Cyprus because the winds were contrary. So what they're doing is the winds are contrary, meaning the winds aren't going to let them sail into Rome, go the way they want to. The winds are going the other direction. So what they're using is they're using the island as a wind barrier. So the island is going to break up the wind so that it doesn't disrupt their boat. Verse 5, and when we had sailed over the sea of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra, a city of Lycia. And there the centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing into Italy, and he put us therein. And when we had sailed slowly many days, and scarce were come over against Cnidius, the wind not suffering us, we sailed under Crete over against Salmone. So when we look at this, okay, this is Salmone is a raised point in the northwest corner of Crete. So this is the south side of Crete, the island, basically. So they're going along. They found a ship that was originally out of Alexandria, which is in northern Egypt, that was sailing to Italy. So Julius and Paul get on that boat, and they start to head over that way as well. So the boat they were on made it to its port, and then they got to find another boat to make it the rest of the way. So now they're going around Crete. Verse 9, now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. Now I'm going to pause for a second here. Let's look at a couple things in verse 9. The fast probably referred to the Jewish holiday called the Day of Atonement, which marked the beginning of the season during which it was generally regarded as unsafe to travel on the Mediterranean Sea because of violent storms. So there's a period of time when the seas are very bad and lots of violent storms. It's not a time to be on the ocean, on the sea of the Mediterranean Sea. The Day of Atonement usually took place in late September or early October. So now we get this idea of, okay, so it's late September, early October timeframe that this is happening, fall season for us. And verse 10, and said unto them, Sirs, I perceive that this voyage will be with hurt and much damage, not only of the lading ship, but also of our lives. So there's a good chance that when Paul says, I perceive that this voyage, the Spirit's probably telling Paul, buckle up. You're going to crash. The boat's going to crash. It's going to be a problem. So he's telling them, guys, I got a bad feeling about this. I think we're going to crash. I think we're going to shipwreck. Verse 11, nevertheless, the centurion believed the master and the owner of the ship more than those things which were spoken by Paul. So the centurion was relying on the ship captain for advice on when would be the best to sail. The captain's opinion was different than the inspiration that Paul had received from the Spirit. The captain might have either not realized the weather would change or that a rare storm was coming, or maybe he was motivated to move forward due to making money on his shipments. So the captain's like, we got to go. I think the ocean's gonna be fine. We've got a window of opportunity here. Let's take this. And Paul's like, I don't think we should go, guys. I got a bad feeling with this. We need to stay here. So here's a good question for us at this point. When do we listen to supposed experts versus listen to the Spirit, or those even who have the Spirit? Sometimes experts are wrong. It's not bad to listen to an expert, but if the Spirit says otherwise, maybe we should listen to the Spirit more than experts? Might be something to think about. That's what happened with Paul. Now, verse 12, and because the haven was not commodious to winter in, the more part advised to depart thence also, if by any means they might attain to Phenice, and there to winter, which is an haven of Crete, and lieth toward the southwest and northwest. So this port was not a good one to be in over the winter, is what they're saying. You got to go. This is not going to be a good place to stay the winter. So there's not a lot of resources here. You're not going to get a lot of opportunity. You're best to move on and winter somewhere else. But Paul's like, no, we need to stay here in winter. And the captain's like, no, we can't winter here. This is a terrible place to winter. We got to move on. Verse 13, and when the south wind blew softly, supposing that they had obtained their purpose, losing thence, they sailed close by Crete. So they think, oh, we got a break in the weather. This is our moment to go. Verse 14, but not long after there arose against it a tempestuous wind called Euroclydon. I think I said that right. Euroclydon, I think is how that is. What is this? Well, let's see, this is a Mediterranean wind that can occur during times when a low pressure area moves through to the south of Malta and causes a strong, cool northeasterly wind to affect the island. It also affects other islands of the western Mediterranean. The name derives from the Italian Grecale, which refers to the island of Zakynthos in Greece. This is likely to be the Euroclydon wind from Greek Euros, east, and Kludon, billow or surge, or Latin aquilo, north, nor a northeaster, or the island Clauda, which wrecked the Apostle Paul's ship on the coast of Malta on his way to Rome. So this is basically in America we hear the idea of a nor'easter. So this is when we have a storm come off the coast and hit a cold front that's coming towards the coast. When those come together, you get dumped on. Massive nor'easters. This up in the New England area, you have those all the time. So this is kind of a version of a nor'easter on the Mediterranean. Basically, it's a storm that just suddenly converges and hits and just nails you. Verse 15, and when the ship was caught and could not bear up into the wind, we let her drive. Meaning they couldn't steer the boat. So they just let the rudder go, so the boat would take itself, basically. Verse 16, and running under a certain island, which is called Clauda, we had much work to come by the boat, which when they had taken up, they used helps, undergirding the ship, and fearing lest they should fall into the quicksands, strake sail, and so were driven. And we, being exceedingly tossed with a tempest the next day, they lightened the ship. So they're just trying to not hit the sandbars, try not to hit these islands. So sometimes they have to let the ship kind of direct itself, and they grab the ship and put it back and are trying to keep it going. And they decide we got to lighten the ship. We don't want to take on water. We're sitting low. We need to get in it. So they need to lighten the ship, toss everything overboard. Verse 19, and the third day we cast out with our own hands the tackling of the ship. They're throwing so much out. They're throwing the stuff they use to control the sails with overboard, the tackle. Verse 20, and when neither sun nor stars in many days appeared, and no small tempest lay on us, all hope that we should be saved was then taken away. So neither sun nor stars in many days, so a lot of cloud cover, basically, but there was no tempest on him. Verse 21, but after long abstinence, Paul stood forth in the midst of them and said, sirs, we should have hearkened unto me, and not have loosed from Crete, and not have gained this harm and loss. And now I exhort you to be of good cheer, for there shall be no loss of any man's life among you, but of the ship. So he's like, guys, you should have listened to me, to the spiritual promptings I got from God. Now I'm here. Just relax though. I know this has been crazy, but just realize the ship is going to be damaged, but we'll all survive, basically. Verse 23, for there stood by me this night the angel of God, whose I am and whom I serve, saying, fear not, Paul, thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer, for I believe God, that it shall be even as it was told me. So I saw a vision, this angel spoke to me and said, we're going to be fine. We'll be okay. I'm supposed to go to talk to Caesar. I need to go to Rome. It's God's will I go to Rome, so we're going to make it. But it's not going to be easy. Verse 26, howbeit we must be cast upon a certain island. But when the 14th night was come, so 2 weeks trying to deal with the weather and storms and all this tumultuousness, as we were driven up and down in Adria, about midnight the shipmen deemed that they drew near to some country. So they think they're approaching land. They're not sure, but they think they're getting there. Verse 28, and sounded, and found it 20 fathoms. And when they had gone a little further, they sounded again and found it 15 fathoms. So they're not quite sure where they're at, basically. Now, this might sound weird. Sounding, what does that mean? Well, they are using sound to determine how far from land they are. So this thing, if you're out at sea and you yell and then listen for the echo, there won't be one, because your sound is going to go out and there's nothing to bounce it back to you. So when they make a sound towards land, they'll hear a little bit of an echo come back. The strength of that echo and the sooner they hear it, the closer to land they are. So that's how they're guessing about how far out they are, basically. Either yelling and listening for the sound to come back or from land, or using a device to make a sound. That's how they're determining how close they are to land. So they're getting closer, basically. Verse 29, then fearing lest we should have fallen upon rocks, they cast 4 anchors out of the stern and wished for the day. So they're worried they're going to hit rocks soon. They're like, oh crap, it's middle of the night, we can't see the shoreline. What if it's rocky? What if there's a reef? We don't want to run into a reef because the boat's going to sink and we're going to have to swim to shore. So they stuck 4 anchors out of the stern. That's the back of the boat. They're stopping the movement of the boat, basically, to halt it where it's at. And they're going to wait for day. So verse 30, as the shipmen were about to flee out of the ship, when they had let down the boat into the sea, under the color as though they would have cast anchors out of the foreship. So they're getting ready to get into lifeboats, basically. Paul said to the centurion and to the soldiers, except these abide in the ship, ye cannot be saved. So they've stopped the boat. Guys are getting out of the boat, basically, onto the lifeboats on the side to get out of there. And Paul says, except they stay, they can't be saved. The centurion wanted to bail out and do his own thing, yet God's promise wouldn't let him. So long as we stick with what we've got to do and do what God wants, he'll help us out. We cannot bail when the going gets tough. We must endure in obedience. That's what's going on here, basically. So Paul is telling him, the only way we make it is if you stay on this boat. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. He wants off. He wants to get out of this craziness. Verse 32, then the soldiers cut off the ropes of the boat and let her fall off. They're letting the lifeboats go. They're breaking them free from the boat and getting rid of them. Verse 33, and while the day was coming on, so probably morning, sunrise, Paul besought them all to take meat, saying, this day is the 14th day that ye have tarried and continue fasting, having taken nothing. And they realize they're on a boat. They only have what they have, and they've thrown a lot of stuff overboard to lighten the load. So they're rationing food. And so he's like, get some meat, let's get some food. You fasted for several days now, basically dealing with all this suffering. Let's eat. Verse 35, and when he had thus spoken, he took bread and gave thanks to God in presence of them all, and when he had broken it, he began to eat. Then were they all of good cheer, and they also took some meat. Now here's what's interesting. They're eating bread, but they're calling it meat. There's a couple reasons for this, okay? So we have to understand that the type of wheat we eat today is not the type of wheat they ate back then. The type of wheat they ate back then is a type of wheat that is high in protein. Okay, wheat today is almost all starch. It's just basically just sugar. White bread is starch. It's just sugar, okay? That's been bred out in the 1800s and early 1900s. They bred wheat to get rid of the protein in it because there's an oil in it that when you grind it, it makes it go bad after a while. And because of the world wars, they had a lot of bad bread, and so they've learned how to process wheat and grow it without the protein in it, which makes it shelf stable, but not healthy. The protein part's healthy. So the problem is in these ancient days, the type of wheat they are eating was had a high protein count to it. Okay, had a lot of protein to it, so the bread helped fill you up. The stuff in between the bread was flavoring. The bread was the main thing you ate. Today, when we eat like a sandwich, the stuff in the middle is the main thing. The bread is just there to hold it together and keep your fingers from getting gross. So we've completely reversed things. Okay, they called bread meat back then because it was a higher protein bread. Now, if you're thinking, but how do I get some of that wheat today? I would like to do that to eat healthier. You want to look for einkorn is a version, or dark rye, spelt, kamut. Those are more the ones you want to look at, basically. Do some more research into those yourself. But that's more what you want to look at, those kinds of wheats. So they're eating, finally, basically. They don't have to worry about rations as much because they're going to go on shore. Verse 37, and we were all in the ship 216 souls. That's a lot of people. Verse 38, and when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and cast out the wheat into the sea. So after they had finished eating, they basically tossed the rest of the food out to keep the boat from sinking. Verse 39, when it was day, they knew not the land, but they discovered a certain creek with a shore, into the which they were minded, if it were possible, to thrust in the ship. So they're looking at the land out there, going, "Okay, we don't not quite know where to land, but there's a creek. If there's a creek, it's going to be deeper. Let's run aground through that creek. Basically, we can get into shore faster through that creek, and then just land our ship there, basically." Verse 40, and when they had taken up the anchors, or in the Greek, they cut off the anchors. So they basically just chopped the ropes, didn't worry about it, didn't bring them back in. They committed themselves unto the sea and loosed the rubber bands and hoisted up the mainsail to the wind and made toward shore. And falling into a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the forepart stuck fast and remained unmovable, but the hinder part was broken with the violence of the waves. So the front of the boat pushed into the sand, got up there. The back of the boat still being pummeled by the waves, basically, and having some challenges there. Verse 42. So now they're on land. And the soldiers' counsel was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim out and escape. Now the soldiers were ordered to kill them if they get into trouble, basically. So that's the kind of thing. If all these prisoners we have try to escape, kill them. Just get rid of them. We're not waiting. We're not going to let them escape, because if the soldiers get back to town and go, "Hey, I survived this crazy storm, but my prisoner got away," they're like, "Why did you let the prisoner get away? You should have just killed him." "Oh yeah, so now you're going to be in trouble." So it's just easier to kill these guys than worry about it. So that's their counsel. Okay, verse 43. But the centurion, willing to save Paul, kept them from their purpose and commanded that they which could swim should cast themselves first into the sea and get to land. So the centurion is like, "No, we shouldn't do that. Let's save Paul and the others, basically. So just get in the sea, head to shore." Verse 4, and the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship, And so it came to pass that they escaped all safe to land. They made it finally to land. Now we're going to have to see what happens for the rest of this trip in the next chapter. We'll see you